depression is how we feel about a variety of things across the board. So it may not just be one thing. It might not just be the the unexpectation met is not what we want, but it's also the sky's not blue today, and my favorite song didn't come on the radio. My hat doesn't fit the way that it used to fit because my head's gotten larger.
That's
or,
my life.
yeah, we might all need to deal with that.
Pants as well.
And the reason why I don't wear a hat anymore. But it's a hard topic, and let me just put a twist on this a little bit. It's hard for us Christians because we are people. We are the overcomer people.
Hey guys, welcome to Foothills Studio Conversations. We're here with Steve Sewell. He's a pastor, chaplain, counselor, author, and he came to our church and spoke with us, and we wanted to just sit down with him and talk to him about the topic of anxiety, depression that is just kind of running rampant in culture, it seems. I looked up some like Pew Research and just various sites that have to do with stats of depression and anxiety in our culture and just how they're on the rise. 1 in 10 people, take anxiety medicine and all of these different things. And so we thought, who better to talk about something like this than someone who counsels people and just deals with hurting people often. But I figured it would probably be good to kind of start off with some definitions just so we kind of know what we're talking about when we say anxiety or when we say depression.
Definitely. I think
So how would you define anxiety?
Well, anxiety mostly deals with when we have unfulfilled expectations.
Okay.
So anytime something happens in our life that causes there to be a little bit of a conflict or maybe even a little rub, it makes us think differently. It makes us do funny things. It makes us squirm. It makes us raise our eyebrows and not feel so good about what's going on. And that seems to be the easiest way to kind of build on what things look like when we're filled with anxiety. So think about the last time you wanted to have a really good steak dinner and you went to a restaurant and you expected, right, to have this amazing piece of meat in front of you on a plate that has garnish and
Right.
All these other things, and then it's burned. And so you take that and you think, that's kind of not what I was expecting.
Right.
And then you have to go through with, okay, do I make a big thing? Do I call the server back? And so all these things cause a lot of these triggers to happen. That's kind of a code word for things that make me do the things I do. And so triggers that cause me to feel low, triggers that make me sweat. So it's all these unfulfilled expectations.
Okay. It's interesting that you defined it that way because as I was thinking about the subject, I mean, I know I get anxious about certain things or whatever, but the way you're defining that, I almost would think of that as like frustration. Like a lot of times frustration happens in marriage and in relationships because of unmet expectations. Like you expect one thing, you get another, and it causes frustration. But you're saying, so maybe frustration is like an outworking of anxiety in that sense? Or
I think frustration is one way that we can label the way we feel about those unfulfilled expectations.
Okay.
My wife puts the vegetables in the oven too long and they're a little mushy. Well, I don't like them mushy. So don't put them in the oven so long.
Yeah.
That. So I might raise my voice or
Sure.
crazy something like that. But even like when as parents, you raise up your kids to be a certain way. You hope that they have some upstanding values that will stay with them, and you kind of expect in your mind and you see in your heart that that's the way they're going to go, and then maybe they turn differently, or maybe they do something differently. It's like, so there's all kinds of feelings that go with that, and frustration might be one.
Sure.
Sadness might be another one. We might just be like, I don't really care, and that's the way they mask it, but they do care somehow. So it just kind of relates differently, shows different in every person.
And depression shows up the similar way. It's a similar type definition as well, right?
Well, yeah, and a lot of times anxiety and depression are looped into the same conversation,
Right.
Very much like what we're doing today.
Right.
And depression is a little differently than anxiety, because while anxiety is the notion of these unfulfilled expectations, depression is how we feel about a variety of things across the board. So it may not just be one thing. It might not just be the unexpectation met is not what we want, but it's also the sky's not blue today, and my favorite song didn't come on the radio. My hat doesn't fit the way that it used to fit because my head's gotten larger.
That's
or,
my life.
yeah, we might all need to deal with that.
Pants as well.
And the reason why I don't wear a hat anymore. But it's a hard topic, and let me just put a twist on this a little bit. It's hard for us Christians because we are the overcomer people, right?
Yeah,
We
for sure.
have knowledge of the scriptures. We know that Jesus wants to heal us. We know that God is there for us. But when things don't look the way we like, that's when there's a whole lot of rub, and we begin to disproportionate our faith, and we compartmentalize that, and we still walk over here. It's a really hard time.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue to just the topic of, as the church with this. Would you agree that there's somewhat of a rise in anxiety and depression in culture? I mean, do you have any?
Maybe just more of an awareness of something
Yeah,
already there.
I think both of those
Sure.
words are really good. I think there is a huge rise of what's happening, and I think that the church is becoming aware. Unfortunately, we are becoming aware about 5 years too late.
Right.
You mentioned 1 in 10 individuals are on some sort of medicine for anxiety or depression, and I think the most recent research is probably more like 2.5 people. That would probably be a little more relevant.
Where do you find those kind of statistics?
Most of the stuff, most of the research that I look at would be, in psychological journals.
Like PubMed. I've heard of PubMed.
Yeah, there's some great stuff there. Psychology Today is a journal that is really good. There's even a Christian psychology journal that is also really, really good as well. And it just creates just a little more awareness. Like you said, I think people are talking about it more. Sunday school leaders are taking medicine. Our pastors are on medicine. Where it used to be, for some, let's say like ADD, ADHD.
My people.
Yeah. It's like, look, there's a squirrel. No, there's another one. And we say all those funny things, and we do all those funny things, and we have conversations like that. But there are more of us that are working through those kinds of things now, and so we've kind of normalized it. And even in the Christian circles, in faith groups across the board, we're making room for those. So churches are creating classes for those who have disabilities. not just physical disabilities, but mental disabilities
Yeah.
too. So, in one church I know of in Washington, they have an amazing Sunday school class that is known in its region for in ADHD Sunday school class. And you can say all you want about what that might look like, and all that kind of
And
stuff.
maybe we'd be
But
right.
I tell you what,
yeah.
they are doing some amazing things.
Wow.
My wife is a teacher. She works with special needs kids, and we're seeing a lot more autism spectrums rise to the surface. And so she has special chairs in her classroom, and so churches are also looking at, do we need to consider some other things so that we can do things right, so that we can talk about it and make people feel normal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
really
think
cool.
one of the reasons we want to do these kind of conversations is because it feels like, and maybe I'm just not looking in the right places, but it feels like with a lot of like cultural trends and things that are happening, as you said, the church is like 5 years too late confronting some of that stuff. And I feel like if we are going to give a message of hope to the world, we need to be like a year ahead of things and actually try to have some of those discussions to whatever degree we can be ahead, or at least at the same time that it starts.
I think that's a great point. And I always, when I hear things like that, I always think about how life is in the Midwest versus how life is on the East or West Coast.
I lived in Chicago-ish area for a while, and it was like 5 years.
Yeah. So I always make fun of the the music industry or the pop culture or the style of clothes. And so in Kansas City area where I live, we still have baggy pants. And it's like, the rest of the country doesn't do that.
Like skinny jeans and
we have skinny jeans now.
Represent.
Yeah.
I'm more of a slim fit guy.
Yeah, and if I can just find pants, right? Otherwise I'm wearing waders. But there is something that the church can see in that, and that is that we need to be a little more in tune with what's happening. Now it's hard because if you say, well, the church needs to be aware of things, then there are some that would say, well, hey, we need to be of the world, not in the world, or in the world of the world, however you want to theology that. And I've come to the place where it's more important for us to be aware of what's happening, and let's meet the needs of our people that are in front of us.
Yeah.
And if we have people that we're not sure what to do, then let's figure out how to meet their needs so that we can love them into the kingdom.
So going from that, you see a trend in churches that we are kind of making way and normalizing to a degree so we can have this kind of conversation, but there still is a stigma against it. There's a lot of people who don't necessarily understand it. Like I myself have definitely felt anxious at times, but when it comes to like severe anxiety or severe depression, like I have the tendency to just be like, just exercise a little, or just whatever,
Which is helpful.
Which is helpful. It's not bad, but
Yeah.
it's also probably not the best approach as far as talking to someone in that situation.
Well, I think a lot of people think these days, and it doesn't help because everyone is becoming medicated. There is a big push for doctors to prescribe and write prescriptions and give people trials,
Right.
and I'm not sure that is a really good working model. I think there's room for that, but I also believe that just as God would heal us and deliver us from the state of depression acuity that we might be in, or the anxiousness that we feel about certain things, I also believe that we should think about our lives living in seasons. more
Mm.
than this is the way it's gonna be.
Sure.
Mhm.
I'm
Oh,
gonna
yeah. Okay.
die with depression, and I'm gonna have to take Prozac, and I'm gonna have to, be in this lorazepam
Mhm.
addiction,
Right.
whatever. And so I think it's really hard. And so I always like to help people realize that let's look at the season that we're in.
Mhm.
Mm.
Let's talk about what is crazy right now
Mhm.
and what we know, for instance, pastors, churches, ministry leaders, right? Christmas, that's not a fun time.
Right.
I mean, we'd like to believe it would be a fun time,
Sure.
and we
Yeah.
want it to be a fun time, and our
Yeah.
families want it to be a fun time for us, but we're busy. We got stuff to do. We got videos to produce. We got
Yes.
messages to speak. We got
Mhm.
extra Sunday school lessons we need to cultivate. We got to run off more papers. I just said run off. Say I'm living in an old season, but so if we can realize and we can recognize half of the times when I'm sitting in a counseling session,
Mhm.
very similar to this type of thing.
Yeah.
Let's just call this our counseling session
Yeah.
for the day.
You guys really need counseling.
Yes.
That you are so right.
How does that feel, Bryce? But I think if we can adapt the idea of, okay, what season are we in right now?
Yeah.
Mhm.
How long do we anticipate us feeling the weight of this project or this task or
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
amount of deadline that is pushing us to a back wall, so that we're not actually feeling cornered,
Mhm.
but we're actually anticipating. Okay, oh yeah, I remember that this is just going to be a rough season until about January 7th,
Mhm.
and
Just
then
gotta push through.
we're good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just keep pushing it through. Let's have people in our lives, like two of you guys, coming around me and saying, "Oh, hey Steve, don't forget. Hey, I'm praying for you."
Mm.
And January 8th,
Yeah.
we're having a party.
Mm.
Or hey,
Kind of that Jeremiah 29:11, like you're in it right now,
Yeah.
but hope is coming.
really,
Yeah.
really good verse to think about, because God's plans for us never are intended, or do they ever shape in a destruction,
Mm.
but they do shape us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so if we can look at our anxiety and our depression in terms of seasons, now where it gets hard, where it gets complicated,
Mhm.
where it gets aggressive, is when seasons back up and then go time and time and time
Mhm.
again
Mm.
of overlapping. And then you have some serious issues with anxiety or depression. That's where we're also missing it. And so, that's where extended counseling sessions needs to be in place. We need to make sure we have good self care techniques going on.
Mhm.
Just like customer service, we have soft skill things, and we have hard skill things.
Right.
So just like that, we also want to make sure that the our regimen that we're in, such as exercise, our
Mhm.
sleep pattern, is the most underrated treatment of anxiety and depression. Sleep.
Well,
Huh.
and I mean, sorry, I feel like I'm talking too much.
No, you go for it.
But like one thing I hear about sleep is so many people are having difficulty with sleep because of devices and screen time. Like either they're watching a war movie right before bed, or they're laying in bed and they're
Yeah.
scrolling on Instagram or Facebook, or
Which is also fascinating because those things themselves increase anxiety for a lot of people, especially like pursuing the dopamine rush of,
Right.
of being liked on social media or something
Exactly.
like that. Yeah.
So remember when we were kids, and I think this is across the board.
up until like 2005 when the iPhone came out.
Yeah. So I'm 51. How old are you?
27.
27. How old are you?
36.
36. Okay. I think that the screen time before bed, for instance, is similar to what our parents told us
Mm.
before we go into the swimming pool. What did they tell us?
I don't
Do
remember.
not eat
Do
30
not
minutes.
eat.
Oh,
You have to wait 30
I was
minutes
like,
Do
before
not
jumping
eat.
in.
The same principle was true when you went to bed.
Mm.
What do you do before you go to bed? You get your pajamas on, you brush your teeth,
The whole
you
ritual.
say your prayers,
Yeah.
or you say good night. You say your that you love someone, and then you turn off the light and you close your eyes.
Right.
Nobody does that anymore because we are so committed to that dopamine addiction. Definitely, we love to be liked. We like to scroll, and because our phones and our devices and things like that are so available, we think, well, we ought to be doing that as often as we can. That's how I unwind. Well, I'm not so sure that that's a good way of unwinding.
Right.
And part of our problem is
It's
why
like,
we don't
I
sleep.
unwind with coffee.
Yeah.
Caffeinated.
Why do we do
Double
that?
caffeinated.
Yeah. So my suggestion would be that, in order for us to sleep well, let's actually prepare ourselves to sleep well. And a lot of people will say, well, my alarm is on my phone. Okay, great. There is a store close by,
My alarm is my 2.5-year-old.
or your 2.5-year-old. Yeah, so true. Go buy an alarm clock and leave your phone in the other room.
Yeah.
Same thing about why people don't enjoy eating together anymore. Because why? We're like, like this. How many times have we seen couples on dates?
Yeah.
And they're sitting across from each other at a very nice restaurant having a very nice steak. And I would rather have their steak because mine burned. And
you can just swap it out.
Yeah,
They're looking
right.
at their
And
phones.
they wouldn't even know it.
This was a
They
story of
wouldn't even know.
experience that you were telling.
Yeah, exactly. So it's it's such an it sounds like an easy fix, and it's not an easy fix. It takes a lot more, but I think we're on the way to make things better for us when we can take care of ourselves better, such as some sleep, making sure we eat well. If all we're eating is junk and garbage and crap, I mean, gosh, that's just not good for us. Yes, we know that, but that actually does affect our our mind. It affects our heart.
Yeah. So, what would you say, if you can pinpoint a couple things, would be some root causes of some of this upswing in anxiety and depression that you've seen? I mean, we talked maybe a little bit about sleep and screen time and so. Have you seen any other kind of cultural things that may be adding to this? I mean, is it just we're more aware because of social media and bloggers, or is there actually an upswing, and what would some of the factors?
I think if you were to examine life in the last 20 years, things have gotten progressively worse on the culture front around on the world. For instance, let's just take a look at music because we all like music, right?
Love it.
So 20 years ago, you bought albums or you bought CDs. Cassette tapes were on the out. So, but you bought something and you held it. When you bought an album, you bought it. You could look at it, and on the front of it, it had art, and on the back, it had liner notes, and inside you could actually see the CD, or maybe there was a bonus. Or now, what is it? We do all of our music almost all by streaming.
Yeah.
Going onto a server or a service and picking out a music, or we have stolen music from other people or from illegitimate sites or things like that. So that's just an example of how our world has gone. So take a look at our personal lives, and we can apply that. Is that things are just so different now, and we as people need to be aware of how to legitimize our purchases, legitimize our thinking and our heart and our life, so that we're not just ripping off or stealing or we're not just adjusting because I don't like this, but I hope and pray that someday albums will come back in full force, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they are.
And they are.
They
But
are.
there's only a few companies that make the actual record players.
Mm-hmm.
And they're charging up a storm right now, you know. So, I mean, there's just so many things. So going back to your question of what are some of the things that are happening, I think change is happening, and we don't like change.
Mm.
Change is difficult, especially change is difficult for the church. Um, I've always said I like change when I'm in charge of it, right? We all
Yeah,
like that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I like to know that my mother-in-law will be here and then she will leave in
And she will
X
not be
amount of
here.
hours.
Right.
Or I might say, you know, I like it that my kids are growing older, but I want them to do as they're told,
Mm.
you know, or, you know, things like that. So I think the world is changing. And the more it's changing, the less we're prepared, the less we're dealing with that well. So we're just saying, well, okay, so we just need more coffee. Or, and oh, gosh,
To keep
I
up,
can't
yeah.
tell you how many times I've heard uh, uh, women in groups, shopping groups or whatever, I just need a glass of wine.
Mm.
I just need a glass of wine. I need a wine therapy or, you know, something like that. And actually, I mean, as much as funny and as joking as that might be,
Mhm.
I wonder how close we are to that.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people are quietly, silently addicted to something because they can't handle change.
Mm. It's funny that you bring up music in that as well, because I do worship leading stuff and try to keep up with all the music that's happening. And I've noticed there's a rise lyrically in words that have to do with God's unchanging, this world's crazy, and so we just gotta kind of put our hope and trust in Him. And I was always wondering, like, why are all these songs coming out right now? Like,
You know,
typically they're diverse, and it's just a
right.
little more focused.
You know, back in the 20s and 30s, we had hymns that were talking about God.
Mhm.
And in the 80s, we started seeing choruses developed.
Mhm.
And we started singing choruses, and that's was the threshold, if you will, of a new wave of worship music that was going to be coming in.
Yeah.
And then that took a while for the church to adjust to because they were fighting over we love hymns. No, we love choruses. And,
Right.
you know, so the chorus people sat over here and the hymn people sat over here, and then we divided services. So, okay, we're going to have a traditional service over here and a chorus-based service over here.
Mhm.
And of course, the chorus-based services were more attended, and then those slowly, you know, the other one. So, you know, we don't like change. Later on, it turned into music that was not so much about God, but we were singing to God.
Mm.
We were saying, God, you are so good. Uh, your faithfulness, talking about my my, my depravity, my place of need
Mhm.
for refuge. And then, as you said, then it turned into this world stinks. This world has no place. I want no place in this world. Lord, I must see you. I must have you. Or it's been um, for, you know, almost like a prophetic word from God to us in a song, such as, you are not alone.
Mm.
You are saved. You are secure. You're in my refuge. You're in my camp, so to speak.
Mm.
So, with this idea of change, I heard someone voice it, and I can't remember who it was recently, but in just some interview I was watching about humans' ability to accept change. You know, it's like, I'm not a history person, so these dates are going to be wrong. But, you know, it wasn't too long ago that it was kind of like the Wild West. And then all of a sudden the industrial age came, and that was a huge change for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And now we're in this tech boom with artificial intelligence, and that's another huge change in not a long amount of time. Before that, it was pretty much kind of agrarian living or whatever. And in the past, like 200 years, it's boom, space travel, boom, tech, boom,
Exactly. That's a great analogy for what we're talking about.
So we're in this time of constant change. It's bringing up levels of stress and anxiety. The church needs to meet that. What are some things that you've seen churches do? I mean, you talked about the ADHD classes and some specific classes to destigmatize it, look at it as real people dealing with real problems. What are some things that you've seen that maybe Foothills can get in, maybe individuals at Foothills can do?
Mhm.
I mean, because a lot of that change happens on the individual basis. It's not all on the church.
Yeah.
So, what are some things?
You know, one of the most important things that we as believers can do when we're meeting with people that don't look like us,
Mhm.
right? The people that we're hoping that we can be a light to in their darkness or be hope for in their hopelessness, is that we can have an acceptance and a welcome to them for one purpose only, to provide comfort.
Mm.
Anytime that we say yes to people's lives, we make a huge, huge step toward comfort. And everybody wants comfort. Doesn't matter what you look like, how old you are, uh, how many jobs you've had, or what. It is everybody's desire to get comfort. But if we say, "Oh no, you're not welcome here," "Oh no, no, we don't like people like you," then we provide more anxiety and hopelessness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And who wants that?
Right.
Yeah.
So anytime the church, and I'm going to be careful here because I know that there are issues that cause the church to be divided. And I know that there are ways that we can separate ourselves from the world, from the community, if we have certain types of people or certain topics that come into place. I'm not suggesting that we begin to judge. I'm not suggesting that we begin to um, put people in labels and say, "Oh, you're one of those. Okay, we will
Sure.
allow you to come up until this point."
Right.
Or, "Oh, you're one of those. Okay, you can come to our church. We'll love you, but you may not do these things."
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I'm not suggesting that we get involved in all of that. What I am suggesting is that we welcome people.
Yeah.
So that people can feel comforted, because then we let God do the rest.
Mhm.
And that's what he's good at, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we say, "Mark, I like to be around you and I want you to feel comfortable, and if you want to, you can share your life with me, and I would love to have coffee with you. I would love to have this kind of setting before. If Bryce never comes, it's fine with me." But what I'm saying to you is that we can open the door and say, there's room for you in my life.
Yeah.
And I hope that I can have a small place in your life as well.
Mhm.
When the church does that, that's the first step. I think that it's a huge thing. And we call that attentiveness. We call that awareness. We call that opening the doors. Some churches say open and accepting. There's a lot of wording in that people have said, "Oh, no, no, no." But the bottom line is, how can we open the doors? How can we welcome people that may not make meatloaf the way we do?
Yeah.
Now that I cannot abide. Yeah. No, I mean, it comes to mind, and it might be way off base, but just the idea of the woman caught in adultery, she's brought before Jesus.
Perfect.
By these men who are like, "Look, we're doing the right thing. We're calling out sin," and Jesus is like, "You without sin cast the first stone."
Yeah.
They can't do it. They walk away, and he ultimately says, "I do not condemn you." He then says, "Go and sin no more." but ultimately, like, it is not up to us as Christians to change people's minds, to change people's hearts.
Mm-hmm.
It's up for us to, in a loving way, unlike they did, bring them before Jesus so they can receive that love and
Right.
compassion.
Mm-hmm.
You remember the story that Jesus shared in Luke, and it was the story where there was a big crowd,
Mm-hmm.
and Jesus was teaching in the room, and everyone was sitting close, and there were 2 or 3 gentlemen that had the compassion on his heart, and had comfort in their minds and their actions, and they were trying to get in the door to present a man who was crippled, that had some sort of disability. Remember that story?
Mhm.
And um, they could not get in the door. There was too many people. Everyone was sitting. Everyone was gathering close, and they were not paying attention. Now, we don't see that in the scripture. We don't see they were attentive to Jesus. And it says that. But what we probably see in between the lines is that they were not attentive to what else was going on. So
Mm-hmm.
what happens? Those guys climb the roof. They remove the tiles from the roof,
Yeah.
and they bring them down and set them right in front of Jesus. And Jesus says, "I see your faith.
Mhm.
I see you, and I see you, and
Mhm.
you are now healed." And everyone was like, "Ah." Well, here's what I think about that. We get so comfortable sitting, and when we're sitting and we have interruptions, we don't like that.
Yeah.
When we're watching a movie and someone's phone goes off, right? Hello, can you please turn your phone off?
Did you see the PSA before the
Yeah,
movie?
right, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But in that setting, I think it's the same type of thing where Jesus is at the well, and he calls her out, and the other people don't know what to do. In the same story,
Mm-hmm.
it it's us being able to say, let's do what we can
Mm-hmm.
to welcome people.
Mhm.
And if they don't look like us, you know what?
Who cares?
Is that such a bad thing?
Yeah. I feel like the view of the church as the family, as just a big old family, is the best,
Yeah.
because I always find it funny. Like, and I understand the reasoning behind this, where people just get so annoyed at the baby that's screaming in the back,
Yeah.
or the kid who's just fiddling around and doing stuff. And over time, I just kind of grew to be like, that's okay, because this is part of the family, and family is loud and messy. And when we do that, we're more accepting to be able to talk about the things like anxiety. We're more willing to just stop everything and be like, my family's hurting. Like,
Yeah.
if my brother or sister was sick, I'm there with them. I will do whatever it takes.
You are so right, Mark. I remember when I was a hospice chaplain, I was going into a house, and the gentleman was there. It was the first time I was going to meet him, and he had cancer, and his wife was there, and his wife was very, very nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Older person, so imagine they normally have their house very immaculate, very nice.
Sure,
Everything
sure.
is set out. There's tea, or there's a sitting room, and then there's a living room, and we're going into the sitting room, and it's messy. She hasn't been able to do the things that she has been wanting to do because she's been taking care of her husband.
Right.
And so I come as a chaplain, and I come to their home, and I meet them, and I arranged it all ahead of time. And she kept saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And I just told her, I said, "Thank you for welcoming me into your house."
Mm.
The way that I look at this is, we live in our home.
Mhm.
We don't just entertain in our home. We live in our home, and you're
Mhm.
living in your home right now. And thank you that you're allowing me to come into your living space.
Mm.
And she didn't quite know what to do with that. She didn't. But I tell you what, when I met with her husband, and her husband said to me, "I'd like for you to come back." Because here's the deal. They've never connected with a pastor before.
Mm.
They've never connected with a pastor because the pastor has always said, "Well, if you don't do this, if you don't do this, if you don't do this in our family, then you are going to not be in our family."
Mhm.
And so I didn't have any of those judgments
Yeah.
Right.
or those presuppositions that you have to pre-requirements, or whatever. So it made it easy. Now it was challenging. That whole 5 or 6 weeks was very challenging for him.
Mm-hmm.
But while we were talking, his wife started to allow conversations to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So she wasn't so worried about what the house looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And then you know what happened? He died.
Mm.
As planned. And she said, Steve, you meant a lot to him. We weren't going to do a service of any kind, but do you think you could show up at the park? We're going to have just a little family gathering. Would you just come and would you just talk like you did to Charlie?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, wow, I sure would.
Yeah, that's awesome. Powerful.
Sometimes I think we're too busy, we're too preoccupied with what we want to do
Mm-hmm.
as a church or as leaders or as neighbors, kind of shut everybody else out unless they look like us.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if anxiety is causing people to freak out instead of being able to say, you know, I noticed that you're not having a good season of your life right now. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm here for you. Leave it at that.
I might say something semi-controversial here.
Oh, no.
But I kind of feel like Christians often over-spiritualize and overthink a lot of things.
Ding, 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 ding.
I mean, some might be controversial, but hey, I got your, that's good.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when it comes to dating, when it comes to interactions with people, it's like, yes, having good theology is important and understanding the character of God and all that. Super, super important. But sometimes we just need to be present in moments and just try to be Jesus and not, oh, what exactly what, hey, what's theologically correct, you know, and like, because it stuns us into inaction.
I think probably one of the most detrimental things that Christians do is open their mouth. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have someone said, "Oh, you know what? I think this could be done. Oh, you know what we could do here?" You're like,
Oh,
thanks for just killing the whole thing.
like
you
through grieving and stuff. I had a 5th grade teacher. Was it 5th or was it 4th? It was 5th. And this was right after 9/11. And the first response out of her mouth was, well, just trying to throw out the right verses of this is how we handle this rather than kids who don't know how to handle the world like this. This is not the world that we knew, you know? And so she just started spouting it off as much as she possibly could rather than just be with us and protect us, like give us some peace.
Dr. Amy Fast, she's a person on Twitter. She's real big on Twitter. And she has an amazing, she's a teacher, she's a principal, and she has an amazing ability to connect with kids and teaching educators to connect with kids. And it triggered me to think about this, that her advice to teachers is, yes, you have an agenda. Yes, you have goals and objectives and procedures and a set of requirements to teach your kids. But this is the only time that you'll have a chance to be in front of them about the season they're in. So when Sandy, when the school shooting happens in Sandy, all across the schools, counselors showed up and were available and things like that. But teachers are the ones that are the gatekeepers. So teachers have this amazing ability to say things like, if you'd like to visit with one of our counselors, please slip me a note on the way into class. Or please please send me a text. Please please raise your hand and I will write your name down so that the counselor may call you out from class. What you're doing is you're providing acceptance. You're providing a space. Now, there'll be some people that want to talk, and then other people may just want to color. there may be people that want to just build. I remember when Sandy happened, and I was training some chaplains actually, and they were like, "Let's get in there and let's really love on those people." And I said, "I love
Counsel
I
the
love
crap
the
out of
I love the excitement. I love all that."
Yeah.
But what we were not doing was we were not thinking about what kind of kids, what kind of students, what kind of parents, what kind of staff that were going to be there.
Mm.
And I was looking around, and I was thinking, okay, who were going to be the ones that were with the quieter ones?
Mm.
Who's going to be the one that are more musical,
Mm-hmm.
that they wanted to write something? Some amazing things can take place out of the pain, right? When we're artistic,
Mm-hmm.
when we're involved in music. I know of a senior high school student right now. She writes beautiful instrumental music, beautiful music. And when she is feeling low and in a place where she can't exist very well, she goes to her piano.
Mm.
And she's learned. Her mom bought her this wonderful computer program that allows her to record the music
Yeah.
and record it in several different ways, I guess. And then she writes, and then she turns it off, and then she goes back to it maybe later.
Mm.
And you'll probably know the exact reference. I can't think of it because I'm so bad at recall. But the first time I ever understood that scripture, that's like mourn with those who mourn. Like I didn't really get it until a guy that I knew who was like 18 or 19, motorcycle head on with the truck. He did survive, but he was in a coma for a long time. And like I remember getting that call, and they're like, "Will you come to the hospital?" And I had never really like. So I called a guy who I knew who was a Christian. He was a doctor, and I was just like, "What do I do? I'm out of my depth on this one." And he brought that up. He was just like, "Just mourn with him. Like you don't have to say anything. If they ask you to pray, pray with them.
Yeah.
Just like be there, be present with them."
Why is it that we feel like we have to fill up the air with words?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's because we have come to a place where everything, there is no silence anymore.
Right.
Even, remember, okay, we were talking about music earlier. Remember that 4 seconds that was in between songs on the record?
Yeah.
Oh
know?
yeah,
That doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you listen to a record. Even on the CD, it's almost instantaneous.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've come so far in this, let's remove all silence. And silence feels like it's
we had a time of silence at young adults last night, 5 minutes. It was like uncomfortable at like
Yeah.
2.5.
Oh, yeah.
And then we kept going. And I was like, ah!
One of the most powerful things Melissa, my wife, told me one time. We were discussing an issue, and I was stuttering. I was stuttering, and I was anxious because I felt like I needed an answer. I needed to give an answer, and I didn't have an answer.
Mm.
And we were talking about, I think we were talking about the kids and all those kind of, there's, a variety of different things. And she asked me something, and I couldn't get the words out. And she was, we were not in a heated discussion, but we were in a discussion where it was fast paced and things were going on, and things like that. And I just need a moment. Just give me a moment. And she was offended by it. But then she realized, oh, okay, I see what's happening. I know what you need right now.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes my kids, because we've come up in this fast-paced world, and lots of argument and talking and debating and all those kinds of things. Well, I sometimes I say, can we have a discussion, but can you slow down a little bit?
Mm.
And it helps them to realize that I'm not as fast of a thinker as they are, maybe, or that I need just a little more time. But maybe the church needs to slow down. Maybe the church needs to have some silence. One of the most progressive things, and it's so funny I say progressive.
It's kind of been spoiled as a word culturally, but
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
One of the most progressive things that we can do as a church is stop and pray.
Oof.
It's like it's in our scriptures,
Yeah.
but we don't stop and pray. But one of the things I do is I will work with a church that's going through a transition, any kind of a major transition. A lot of times a pastor will leave, or there will be something traumatic that happened in the church, which causes a lot of depression and anxiety, things that we're talking about, right? So the first thing I do is when I come is I usually wind up coming for 3 or 4 Sundays in a row, or 3 or 4 times, and I'll encourage them. Let's stop the routine and let's gather to reflect and say what's on our mind, talk about what's on our heart, and respond to the tragedy, or respond to the situation, or respond to the new season. And then what I do is I call people to pray. I say, can we, for the next X amount of days, come to the church as a family and pray? Can we come to the church? Can we have times of prayer on our own so that we're learning about what God wants to do in our lives before we just start doing it and getting busy doing it? It's that encounter with God. I mean, doesn't that change everything?
Yeah.
So
It's interesting you bring that up because recently I was talking to Pastor Phil. He's like the pastor of marriage and family at the church, and
What we call Big Daddy Weave?
Big Philly style, as I like to call him.
He's awesome.
And I was just talking about how
I love that guy.
I want to be a better husband than I am, and I don't feel like I've been. Yeah, well, sure. I don't feel like I've been leading or even trying to lead sometimes. And he asked me a really convicting question, though. He may or may not have known it. It was, well, how does she respond when you pray for her? And I was like, well, I'd have to be praying for her to know the answer to that question. And ever since then, I've been super intentional about it, and really, but
it wasn't just praying for her; it's praying over her, with her.
Right, yeah, exactly. And so I've been trying to be very intentional, and it just struck me how weird is it that I find it weird to pray with my wife, who knows me better than anyone. Like, why is it so weird? And it's because I have not made a practice of it. And so just kind of on the individual level, it's like sometimes we have to choose that discomfort to get to where that becomes habit. Dylan was talking with us yesterday about a neuroscience person. I don't know what they're called. A neuroscientist. Let's go.
Sounds good to me.
And
does that stuff.
And she was talking about the brain as like kind of this tree that over time through our habits and all that becomes very rigid, and when you hit some trigger, you go boom, 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 here's my response. Boom, 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 here's my response. And he brought up Romans 12, 1-2, which is the idea that the Holy Spirit in us renews our mind. 2 Corinthians 5:17 is also, it's that new creation. The old is gone and the new has come. It's like, as Christians, we are spirit empowered to actually change our way of thinking. We're not trying to do it by our own volition. We have this Holy Spirit power that empowers us to actually renew our thought processes and change it and all of that kind of stuff. We're not doing it alone, so we have that like leg up, which to me was just like a hugely encouraging way to kind of think about it, like, because so often we have anxiety or depression because we feel like we just can't do it, and the reality is maybe we can't, but we are not alone in it. That's the thing. We have him to do it for us and with us.
Isn't it interesting how people of God, people of the church, people who are in ministry, um, we we are confronted with the very things that you're talking about, um, being changed, being renewed, being refreshed. I love Ecclesiastes chapter 3. I mean, excuse me, not Ecclesiastes, Lamentations chapter 3, um, where it says there's mercies are new every morning. And one of the reasons why I believe that that is such a good thing is because I need to get that through my thick head, that I need mercies that are new
Mm.
every day. I don't need yesterday's mercies. I don't need last year's mercies. They were good, and I was really grateful and thankful for them. But today's a new day. Today is October 31st, and I need His mercies today. I don't need yesterday's. Yesterday's were fine, but today's a new day,
Yeah.
and I got a lot of crap going on today. Or there's a lot of stuff hitting me, what, because I have deadlines or, pressures or whatever. And I think, going back to the issue of anxiety and depression, these are the things that cause people over and over again to feel shamed about, to regret, to feel guilty about, and then they just hold it in and they just hold it in. Number one problem in the American way of life, in America, is that we will hold grudges.
Yeah.
We will hold grudges over things that we have no business holding grudges. There are people upset that in 1978 something happened, and they've been holding on to that for years. There's, there's I get upset because stores don't have pants that fit me.
Sure.
And Melissa's like, "Oh, Steve, just promise me you won't yell at the clerk. It's not their fault that they don't have pants to fit you. Well, they should." And we could be upset, and we can, and I'm trying to be funny, but the bottom line is that there's seasons of our life that we really truly need to figure out, God, what do you want to say to us?
Yeah.
What do you want to do in our lives? This season is going to be really easy. God, I want to pick up a new book. I just started reading Max Lucado's Anxious for Nothing. Really good. It's really good. Now, I like Max Lucado, and I think he writes nice.
Yeah.
And he speaks nice. But this book especially is good. The other ones have been really fine, but this one is really good. There's a book by Bill Hybels that was written in the 90s called Too Busy Not to Pray. Changed my life. It changed my life. It changed my prayer life. It changed the way that I looked at my life, because I'm thinking, well, I got so many things to do today, so Lord, you're just going to have to make up the difference. And that would be like my favorite prayer. Lord, make up the difference. It's kind of like, I got a lot of stuff happening, meet me on the way. And sometimes I think, that happens.
Yeah.
That needs to happen. But I'm a firm believer that if we don't have a personal encounter with God about the season we're in, then we will not hear. And here's the deal. Our healing might be delayed. Our healing might not come in the way that it would be the best, because God doesn't shove His stuff down our throats.
Right.
So I went to the dentist a number of years ago, right? We love that place, right? And my dentist said, Steve, what I'd like to do is I'd like to put you on a plan for the first year. I'd like to see you 3 times a year, and that's going to cost you a little more money. Your insurance, I'm going to work with your insurance, but I want you to come 3 times because you have a lot of buildup in your teeth. And I almost thought he was going to say my life. So I was like, hey, back off, buddy. You're just a dentist, okay? But so he's talking to me about the buildup, and he's talking about the things that need to happen in my mouth and my teeth, and my gums and all that kind of stuff. So he said, and then the second year, I'm going to see you for the first part of the year. I'm going to see you an additional time, and then I want to see you 2 times a year, and then after that, I want to put you on a special little, thing, and then regular, season from that. I said, okay, sounds okay, and he could see my, I'll see if it's going to work out, that kind of an attitude, right?
Yeah,
When
yeah,
our
yeah.
wives say something, yeah, I'll get to that, honey. Yeah, I could put that on my to-do list. And so he said we can root plane.
Ooh,
I said, root plane? He
that
says,
sounds no fun.
yeah. He says, what we'll do is we'll come in and we'll remove some of your gums, the gum lining, and we'll plane the roots. We'll take a little sander and we'll sand those down so that normal growth could take place. So I said,
Context is everything.
Yeah.
yeah, right?
Yeah.
Right. So
That
I
perspective.
said to him, well, I'll be happy to come in 3 times a year.
Yeah.
He says, I figured that you would like to do that rather than root planing. So my wife and I, we talk sometimes, and we goof around, we kid around,
Yeah.
and I've used that illustration lots of times. But here's the deal: either we settle what God wants to do in our lives, and we allow Him to speak to us, and we encounter with Him, and we have an impacting relationship with Him, or we might find ourselves in a position where we will be root planed.
It's that refiner's fire.
Yeah,
Just like
very, very good way of
it'll-
putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it burns and
Yeah.
it hurts.
But
The more buildup, the hotter the fire's got to get.
yeah, right? Yeah. So I'm more interested in hearing from God. Okay, Lord, what do you want to do right now? Because I don't want to root plane.
Mhm.
I want healing to come. I want to do it according to your time, Lord. What's your process?
So I'm gonna kind of bring it to a close. But one thing that you just reminded me of is I feel like a lot of the things that I've learned and the ways that I've learned to kind of change my mindset, it requires effort. Like it always comes when I'm like reading,
Oh,
I'm listening to audiobooks or debates or discussions. In there, I mean, we live in such a headline centric culture where we like read the headline, we're like, got it, I know what that's all about. And but there are times when like I'll read a book and he'll be like, a lot of people think this way, and I'm like, that's totally what I think. And then he's like, but, and I'm like, oh, and then he'll say something else. I'm like, oh wow, I've never thought of it that way, and that's very interesting. Like, and then it causes that kind of rubbing, that anxiety, because you're like, oh, but I've always thought this way, and I think this way, and you have to kind of come to terms with that. And I think kind of individually, people need to start challenging themselves beyond what their knowledge is to look at some other opinions and other perspectives, and sometimes that will help as far as this working through things. To people go to your seminars to hear a different way to think and how to approach, and that is one of those things that can kind of help pull people out. But it's hard. It has that rubbing, it has that chafing. So
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
that would be one of my practical walkaways. Like, try to hear other opinions aside from the people outside of your normal group. Like,
Or aside from your normal mental cycles that you go through.
right,
Yeah.
right. This will be my last thing that hopefully you can kind of close on. You kind of talked about this repetitive pattern. It's kind of cyclical. It's that dog chasing its tail kind of thing. And we are coming into the holiday season, which for a lot of people is kind of peak anxiety, peak depression because of loss and all of this kind of stuff. If you could kind of quickly, and I know that's hard, but quickly speak to that, and
Talking to me.
and how we can, if we're dealing with loss, if we're dealing with anxiety of everyone's coming over and my house has to look the best or whatever, how can we have a meaningful holiday where we really connect with people, We're not looking at devices, all that kind of stuff. How can we have those kind of meaningful times?
Well, I think that's a really good. I think it's a really good point. That anxiety does heighten in holiday times because of the expectations. And you
Mhm.
remember when we said at the very beginning of our conversation today that we talked about what anxiety is, and it's kind of a unfulfilled expectation.
Mhm.
And a lot of times during the holidays, we have people come into our life because it's what they do on the holidays. Um, and so sometimes I think that we um, can get so like, well, we just got to endure this.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure that is a great model all the time. I think there are some times where it's like, okay, I got 36 hours with Aunt Mabel.
Dear Aunt Mabel,
Lord.
bless her heart.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Yeah. Lord, give me the strength so I don't put a knife through her eye. You know? So, sometimes we only have 36 hours and you hope that you can sleep about 19 of those. So, but that doesn't always happen.
Right.
So, because Aunt Mabel has some expectations and she wants the stuffing to look like this and she wants Christmas morning to look like this and all that kind of stuff. Okay. But maybe it's our time to think about what those expectations are, and for us to be able to say, you know what, let's stop the madness. Let's let's stop the fight of just doing what Aunt Mabel wants us to do. This year, we're going to do Christmas the way that we want to do it. So if my wife was here or if my kids were here, okay, kids, guys, what do you want to do? Let's do something different,
Yeah.
And most, for instance, at our house, so just wrap this up. Thanksgiving, there's only two people in our house that like turkey. Two, me and my middle son, Mark. We're the only ones that like turkey. Everybody else is like, it's dry, it tastes very good. Who likes cranberry? Just like, just talking. So we said, what do we all like? Well, we love tacos. Ta-da! So what do? Thanksgiving?
Turkey tacos?
We make regular 6 dozen of tacos. Homemade tacos. We buy the tortillas. We don't do the homemade tortilla things.
Mm-hmm.
But we make tacos. And they are awesome. And my kids' friends like it. My friends will, hey, can I have a taco? No. And,
How welcoming.
Yeah. Okay.
My
It's on my terms.
Mm.
So it's like, hey, we're in, and our Thanksgivings are awesome because we're not stressing over turkey and having it done right and all that kind of
Mashed
stuff.
potatoes and
Yeah.
the Pinterest presentation.
Yeah, right. So now we start making tacos early in the morning, and we have tacos about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and it's great. Then we go see a movie.
There you go.
So that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But for other people, it would be like, oh, what do you mean? You don't have the ham? Oh my gosh, is the world gonna collide? No green bean casserole. So it's just kind of a hard thing. And here's the deal. 1955, October 30th, yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before that, the person who invented green bean casserole died. I don't know if you knew that or not, but she died. And she was a Campbell.
How do you know that?
She was well.
You love green bean casserole.
I can't talk to you about that. But what I do know is that she died, and I'm pretty sure that the expectation was for her green bean casserole to be enjoyed, not stressed over. And holidays are to be enjoyed, not stressed over. So I always say, make a plan. Tell your family. And Mabel or Uncle George is not here, or Grandpa Joe is not here anymore. Well, how are we going to do Christmas differently than that way. And I have a whole seminar on handling the holiday blues for, things like that.
Mhm.
So it's very important that we think about that, especially when it comes to anxiety, depression, and our own worldview, I guess, if you will, of what God wants to say to us. You know,
Mhm.
and I hope that changes things. I hope that changes the perspective, even in your church. I love Foothills Church, and I love the fact that you guys can think about how to hear from God, and that you're having a series called Life Care. I mean, gosh, that's great. You mentioned one of the things that happens in churches and what churches can do. I recall a church in Greeley, Colorado, that did a message on the Book of Psalms, a series through the Book of Psalms, and it was all about different. Can we just call them hang-ups? And so there was one. The Psalms talks about anxiety. The Psalms talks about breakups. The Psalms talks about parenting and unruly children, or the Psalms talks about time, or whatever. And it was just and he brought it in such a really nice, easy, cool vibe that let people realize that
About cool vibes.
God has something to say about anxiety, about breakups, about time, but he used the Book of Psalms, which is a real poetic and illustrative, and uses the images of God as refuge or as shelter or a strong tower, those kinds of things that really made a big difference. So that's what we can do.
Well, there's a lot more to talk about when it comes to anxiety, depression, but we want to thank you, Steve, for coming in and chatting with us. If you guys have any feedback, any stories of how God has helped you through, or you're even in a season and you need help, feel free to hit us up on Twitter, comment on this video, any of that kind of stuff. Email Bryce or Mark at foothillscp.org and
Snail
at
mail.
foothillscp on Twitter and social and stuff. Have a good day, guys.
Thanks, guys.